as Christians, we recognize that there is that hope and that promise on the other side of our deepest and darkest moments. But imagine with me for a moment that woman, the widow in Nain. Here is someone, we guess that she is a Gentile, and that she is living in this town that has a mix of Roman and Gentile and Jewish people living there. And in her world, if you were a widow without a child to take care of you, in a sense you had lost any economic stability. What were you left to do? Who would take care of you in your old age? You don't have the husband or the partner. You don't have the children to take care of you. And so here she was struggling. On top of, imagine, being a parent and losing your only child. The heartfelt grief and pain wrapped in her heart at that moment. So here she comes with this deep pain and loss, and these questions about where her life is going to end up, what it's going to look like. And imagine those carrying the bier outside of the city gate, the pain that is all around them. And Jesus comes, in a sense, stumbling upon them. He's been having a pretty good run of things. He's given the Sermon on the Plain. People are listening to him. Incredible things are happening in his ministry. And he stumbles upon this funeral procession. And as he hears the story, he stops, he goes over, and he touches the bier. And he says, "Young man, arise." My guess is, in that moment, many were perhaps startled, perhaps thought it a little bit funny or odd. And yet, when that young man sits up, eyes are opened, and we are told that fear or astonishment seizes the people. That in that moment, that extreme desperation and sense of loss, that extreme hopelessness and wondering about what her future might hold is done away with. That in that moment, new life breaks in, not for a young man, but for a woman and for a community, as a sense of wholeness and new life breaks in. Now, the one thing about resurrection, or the stories of resurrection in the New Testament, and there are 7 of them, these stories aren't just about an individual, ever. They're about a community that experiences new life. Whether we look at this young man, the widow's son, or we look at Lazarus, who is brought back into community and into connection with his sisters and the larger community, these stories point to something much greater, much more profound. And it is this that draws us to this place. Because we know that in our community and in our larger world, there are people struggling with tough things, places of incredible hurt, broken relationships, perhaps their own or family members, those places where a child has been lost or a parent. Perhaps there has been a miscarriage. There are those places where disease and illness set in. Those places where our emotions run amok. Perhaps even struggling with depression, anxiety. And all of these things lead us to that point of asking, why? What's the purpose? What's the use of going on? And yet our lives are interrupted when we come here on Sunday mornings, we know that not one of those instances or one of those things has the last word. That not one of those places of despair or hurt, no matter how long it lasts or what it means, is going to hold us down forever. That there are those points where we will be touched, lifted into a new way of being, that new life will be revealed. And so, as the questions linger outside of these walls, and even in our larger communities, about why do we come together on Sunday mornings? What does it mean? The answer lies in that promise of new life. That coming together, we recognize that power of depression or death or loss does not have the last word. But we also recognize that the hope and the love that takes root does not go about in just an individualistic way. Rather, it draws each of us back into community. That we may be part of the celebration, the fear, the astonishment, and the awe together. And then that we become the ones who witness to this life and touch others. I invite you to think for a moment, who in the world today is carrying the beer through the city streets out to the gates? Who is carrying it? And who is there mourning deeply? Who feels lost by society, excluded? Who feels like their only hope is gone? Perhaps it is the single parent struggling to make ends meet. Perhaps it is that teenager who is gay or lesbian who hasn't found community or a place to connect. Perhaps it is that older person living alone in their apartment or nursing home, remembering stories, but wondering what their life really means now. How can they share, connect, know that they're not alone? Perhaps it is those people on the Gulf Coast who know that their economy is shattered for this year and perhaps many years into the future, who are now in tears over what is happening, not only for them, but for our creation. And how are we going to lay our hands there, to touch, to make new life known? My guess is that each and every one of you can think of dozens of examples of people, of communities, of current events, where there is this hopelessness, this sense of death. But coming here, the word that is spoken is one of hope, of our lives being interrupted and changed. So that then, as we go through these doors, we too can interrupt the lives of others, recognizing that there is a place, a hope, where God enters in. And it doesn't rest just on faith, but it rests on God's love, claiming us and redeeming us. We put out our hands, we touch those in need, and we watch as new hope, resurrection takes shape. Thanks be to God for this day, for this time. Thanks be to God for the new life that claims us and that we can claim.